Hi, I'm Glick, and I'm so happy to welcome you to the 2022 Marilyn K. Glick Women's Enrichment Series. We're proud to have Sunny Lou Williams here today. Sunny is the president of TechServ and is dedicated to lifting underserved communities. Few people have created as powerful an impact in the state of Indiana as Sunny, and yet her recognition leaves her an unsung hero. She hasn't always received the credit that she deserves, especially in communities of color. TechServ was originally founded by Sunny's grandmother, then owned by her mother, and now by Sunny. 3 generations of Taiwanese-American female ownership. That's pretty amazing. This year, TechServ celebrates its 30-year anniversary. Pretty impressive. TechServ supports and facilitates community impact programs in Indiana, the US, and beyond. Sunny's influence doesn't stop there. She's active on several nonprofit boards, including the United Nations Committee for Women and Girls, SBA's Small Business Advisory Council, the Bank of America Small Business Council, the Women's Fund Board, Indiana University Kelley School of Business Dean's Council, the International School of Indiana, Susan Komen of Central Indiana Leadership Council, the Startup Foundation Board, the American Heart Association's Go Red for Women 2021 Chair, and the Circle of Red Leadership Council. We're so happy to welcome Sunny to our program today. Please join me in welcoming her.
Marianne, thank you for that warm and wonderful welcome and introduction. I'm really excited to be here with you all tonight. And, it's difficult for me to talk about me. So I have invited my good friend, my dear friend, Sally Winter, to interview me and just ask some questions to kind of help me get flowing in this opportunity to really talk about what's influenced me and who all has helped me to get to where I am today. So, Sally?
All right. Well, we've heard certainly about a lot of the things you have achieved. So let's start at the beginning. Tell us a little bit about where you're from, Sunny. Where'd you grow up?
So I grew up in this little island nation in Taiwan. And when I was little, I remember exploring forests and running through the city like a city is a child's playscape, right? So I grew up incredibly sheltered, but in a 10 million person population city, raised by my grandparents, which I never thought was odd until later in life, and had this wonderful experience of just having this place feel safe and feel as if it was just my mind to discover. And so Taiwan has always been very formative in my years of looking at what's next. I remember in every major milestone decision, I found myself taking a trip back to Taipei to really get to the roots of my identity, to really go to a place where I felt like I could be truly me and look at the next step of my decision through a lens that would be true to myself. So I like to say that I am Chinese by heritage. I am Taiwanese as a kind of nationalist spirit. I'm a United States citizen. I'm an adopted Hoosier. And I really just love all of the communities of wherever I have set foot and laid my head as part of where I come from.
Well, and certainly locations have had a lot to do with who you've become and what you've been influenced by. Tell us a little bit about the people as well who have influenced and made you into the person you are today.
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier that my grandparents were my formative, right, parents and my role model. And so it really comes down to two people, my grandfather, my father's father, and my grandmother, my father's mother, and they were just incredible people, right? Like my grandfather left home at 19. He joined the army, and he literally traversed China on war campaigns and ended up in Taiwan. My grandmother was the second daughter of a second wife, and so in those days, the normative would have meant that she wouldn't have been educated and she wouldn't have had the opportunities that she did, but she became the first cohort of policewomen in the country of Taiwan. And so over the years, myself going through the milestones of becoming a woman myself, of course, my closeness was much more intimate with my grandmother, but I remember being given these phenomenal just lessons from both of them that carry with me today. And so those two individuals have really shaped the person that I've become. And I just want to share just two quick stories about them. My grandfather, who's no longer with us, and had this just incredible way about him of being able to teach you as a young person very, very adult themes. And so I remember when I was at a summer at home in Taipei, he had put in front of me on his calligraphy desk, because he was retired by then. He every day did work doing calligraphy as if he was at a job. So 8 to 5 every day, calligraphy, practice. So on one of his rare breaks, he took me and he sat me down next to him. I might have been 9 or 10. And he said, look at these two notes. One was a $100 bill in US, and one was a $100 bill in new Taiwan dollars. And that $100 bill in US was, in our sense, and my 10-year-old self was like, wow, that's a lot of money, right? That $100 new Taiwan dollar bill was the equivalent of $3 US. And he said, look at these two notes. Look at how they are formed. Look at the lettering, the symbolism. Look at, across the board, how these two currencies are the symbolic representation of what their countries stand for. I'm 10, Sally. I'm like, whoa, okay. And so I really looked at it, and I really looked at that $100 bill, and it said, "In God we trust," right? And I really looked at that new Taiwan dollar, and it showcased that Taiwan was such a new country. Mm-hmm. And it was so young and so infant, right? The green of the $100 was so stark and formal, and the bright red and pink of the new Taiwan dollar was just so vibrant, and you can just feel the newness of it. And I really, through that story, really recognized later in life what he was trying to tell me, which was, look at the systems, look at the institutions, and look at how we form countries, because it's those same principles and values that form the organizations that we lead, that form the communities that we belong to. And so he, who is someone in our heritage, was given a birthright of being the eldest son, chose to leave his home country, chose to go to new frontiers and adventures and say, this is what I believe in and this is what I'll work towards. And, kind of down with the political systems, and here's where it is today, and here's what could be. And so that hope and that installation of, you can transform systems, you can transform organizations, has more than anything else taught me to be fearless in the journeys that I've had the pleasure of going on.
Does that kind of give you like a permission to be bold, sort of, right? Look what they did. And
I love that phrasing. Yes, it gives me just this undaunted access to say, this is the legacy that you hail from. So it's your responsibility to be bold. Mm-hmm. And it is this continuous benchmark that I put myself against. And sometimes it's why I'm so hesitant to talk about myself, because I'm like, I haven't done anything. compared to my role models who have literally built nations, right? It's like, okay, well, this thing I did is fine. It's great. But I'm not going to talk about it. And then, my grandmother is just, she is an incredible woman. I don't know how she has survived all that she has. And this is a kind of a poignant, bittersweet story, but I remember a little bit older, maybe around 12 or 13, I loved watching these anime films. And when you think anime films, you think, oh gosh, like cartoons? No. There's this rich tradition in Asian anime that talks about the history, but it's a very humanized story of struggle. So there's this beautiful film about the aftermath of the Hiroshima bomb on the country of Japan, and it's this beautiful, just horrendously bittersweet story. I won't ruin the ending for you, about this young boy and his little sister that are orphaned because of the bombs. And it's about the aftermath and the struggle. And I remember watching this with my grandmother, and I am just bawling. I am sobbing because it is just so sad and it touches the heartstrings. And I turned to her, and she was just very stoic. And I said, Grandma, how can you not be sad? Right? And she turns to me and she tells me the story of how she went through escaping China and this just incredible, her story, and how they literally walked across China from her home city in Shanghai to the port, and how she lost a sister. Her sister passed on this escape. And I am like, I could not respond. I had just bawled my eyes out at this story, and all I could do was like touch her arms and touch her face and go, you are here. I can't believe you're here. And it was just this incredible story of how we persevere in the most incredible struggles. And I've never had that, right? So I'm sorry, and that's why I don't like talking about myself and my family, because it is these incredible stories that I could never live up to. Did you? Thank you. And so I think that everybody has a story. Everybody comes from a place, and everybody comes from, a very human, right? A very human experience. But I think that more than anything else, because I was raised by these incredible people, that I have had more of a burden of legacy. I'm turning 40 this year. And so I have transitioned that to be it's no longer a burden of legacy, but more so it's a legacy, right? And to say, what else are we doing? What else are we going through and providing to better our communities? Because we are here. I'm here. So what purpose am I serving? Yes.
More of a torch to carry rather than something to live up to, right? You're continuing that work. For sure.
Yeah.
Well, and fast forwarding a bit from where you grew up to education has been really important to you.
Yes.
Talk to me about some of your takeaways from your time at Purdue Cranert, from getting your Kelly MBA. What was, so much of what you've done is hands-on, and and making it happen. But what parts of your education were instrumental in who you became?
My dad was not a great student. He's going to not love that I said this on film. But he was not a great student, but he became a continuous learner. And so when we were growing up, he would always sit us down. We didn't have family dinners, as we more so had strategic meetings with my parents and myself and my siblings. I'm the oldest of four. And he would always say, if you're going to do it well. And if you do not know how to do it well, then seek the advice or learn or go through and get the education to do what you need to do. Because nothing is ever new, it's just new to you. So that was a lot of different cliches and idioms and whatnot there. And I think ultimately my journey through education has been a very structured exploration of what could be. I had a phenomenal public school education in Naperville, Illinois. And at the time that I went to public school, the district that I went to, District 203, was the #1 in the nation. My science teachers were former physicians that were burned out from the medical field and came and wanted to teach high school biology for all intents and purposes. I remember my lit teacher was a retired professor from Brown, right? Like, these are people that loved their craft, lived their work, right? And then when I had the opportunity to apply to college, I was in a very, 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 very competitive school environment. And so out of like 600 or so students, we had like 90% placement in that senior class, and just ridiculous number of amazing institutions that people went to. And I thought, oh yeah, I want to get as far away from my family as possible. So I applied to East Coast, West Coast, et cetera schools. And I ended up at Purdue because it was the closest school within driving distance to my family. Because after all that adventure seeking, I couldn't take that next step. And I was home every weekend for that first year because I just didn't really recognize what this family and their influences and their support, albeit sometimes it didn't feel like so much support as it was just a, very literal push to be like, do this thing. And so that education, I went to Purdue as an undergrad in liberal arts. I went to the best engineering school in the country as a liberal arts major. That's correct. And I had this amazing education in just all things about who we are as a society. And I had phenomenal professors that were archaeologists, that were political theorists, that were instrumental in creating frameworks and models of how we run our World Health Organization, how we run our institutions that are centric on community and economic development. And it was one of the best kept secrets. And the School of Liberal Arts there still today graduates humanitarians of the world. That's not their branding, but that's mine. That's yours. I'll blend it to them.
You're a great advocate.
Thank you. And then I went to Kelly because I had a phenomenal opportunity to work with an organization that when I joined was in very, very fast growth, very huge scale opportunities. And at a very young age, my longtime mentor and just really incredible advocate of me individually, Albert Chen with Telamon, said, I want you to grow this organization. And so he had me at 23 lead an organization of 20 people that we grew to 243 individuals across multiple sites. Wow. And I, every day, because it was a 24/7 operations, went, what am I doing? How am I doing it? Are we going to survive this? Are people going to lose jobs and so forth? And so I went to Kelly to get that application on a real-time basis of how to run my business. And what I found at Kelly was not only a world-class education, it was truly the network of people. My cohort was members that were already vice presidents in their own right in various organizations across the state. So when I had to build that warehouse, right, it was my cohort member that came and walked that warehouse floor with me and was like, this is how you put down ESD flooring. This is what you need to think about with your vendors. It was that phenomenal HR representative that said, here's what you need to look at when you look at recruiting, when you look at hiring practices, when you look at 10x growth of your organization. And it's to those friendships and relationships to this day that I look to as really my mentors of, so how do I get this done? How do I lean on you to help me through something that I may be experiencing for the first time? But because of it's my first experience, that shouldn't be anybody else's burden of the mistakes that I eventually will have along the way. So,
we'll
education.
Yes, and we'll come back to some of those lessons gained at Taiwan and that experience.
Yeah.
But before then, you also spent the year after you finished with your bachelor's degree at the London School of Economics and Political Science. So tell me a little about that, because you've been very, structured in your education. And tell me what brought you there and what were some of the takeaways of that experience.
That was my year of unplanned, I'm going to experience life. So, being the daughter of Taiwanese-Immigrants and that whole tiger mom, right? It's a real thing. So I never really felt like I had the permission to just have fun. So when I went to undergrad at Purdue, I was like, how do people have fun here?
You went to a good place for that.
Yeah, it's a really good place. And so the Greek system was introduced to me. And for many years, my parents were like, I don't understand this Greek system thing. Like, what is this? And so I had an incredible network of just wonderful women that we were coming up together. We were, going through our formative years together. And we had a lot of fun. But I'm one of those people that, for better or for worse, I have to have that next thing. I have to have the vision for what else is there. And so where most people would have spent their senior year just having fun and really getting excited, I thought, this is something we've already done. I don't see myself spending another year doing this. So much to the chagrin of many of and to this day, some of my very, very good sorority sisters are like, we still can't believe you took that year and just left. But I did. I left and I applied to this program. It was the Hansard Scholars Program. I thought I was going to be an attorney, and I thought I was going to, revolutionize the world by changing political systems across different nations. And so I applied to this program that gave the scholars an opportunity to participate in parliamentary procedure. And so what I did for my year of fun is I wrote a dossier on how to build wells in Afghanistan. And it is incredibly complex sourcing well building inventory when you know nothing about well building. And ultimately, at the end of that year of seeing all the sites, enjoying, of course, many pubs across London, and just meeting amazing scholars and other people that wanted to use law and society as their launch pad to do the works that they wanted to do in the world, I had this incredible year of networking with these folks. Some of them one of them is now the youngest senator, right? Some of the other folks are doing truly transformative change work within the legal system. And I found out, I think I'd rather build the well than write about it. And so that was my trajectory to eschew becoming an attorney, which I have still a second grade paper when everybody else was wanting to be firemen, astronauts, and whatnot. I wanted to be an attorney, not a lawyer, and an attorney on environmental justice. What second grader writes that they want to be an environmental justice attorney? I don't know. But that formative year said, you want to do the work, right? And so I still am really trying to understand what doing the work means, because my husband will tell you that my doing the work is not rolling up my sleeves with the shovel and all of this construction literal work, but it is really more about the movement of ideas and the influence of people and truly the impact of what that looks like to the community.
Well, the idea has to come before the shovel.
Right.
So there you are. So you went on to spend the next 14 years, the first 14 years of your professional career, right, working for who's your business leader you just mentioned, Albert Chen. What were some of your growth highlights there? I mean, you talked already a bit about his faith in you, right? But certainly you earned that. So talk to me a little bit about your growth at Telamon in those 14 years.
I will say that Albert Chen has been an incredibly generous leader and really is the epitome of what I would consider a people first leader. And I am very thankful that throughout the years that I had under his tutelage, that he left me really with two encompassing frameworks of how you do what you want to do. And the first is, it is not your employee's job to find their fit, it's your job. And when you hire someone, you have to honor them by understanding their skill set. And you have to understand why that skill set is valued in your organization. It's not up to them to prove, why they're valuable. And I think oftentimes when we mix up the words leadership and management, we unfortunately flip-flop at the detriment to our employees what the real purpose is. And so that's always left an incredible impact to me to say, it really is my job that the people that do this incredible work, right, the folks that really subscribe to the craziness that is what I want to do, are honored for their contribution and the work that they are supporting us in. And I think the second key thing that he shared with me is, he said, there's a difference between your values and your work. And sometimes what you value does not become your work, but always your work has to exemplify what you value. And so, as I'm having this incredible journey, which Albert really spearheaded, he said, I think you really should just take this company and go with it. And back in 2018, I go, what does that mean? And I'm thinking, did I just get fired? Wait a minute, was I laid off? I don't understand what that meant. And I literally went back to a textbook, and he's like, just figure out a way to do it. And I go, I don't know what that means. So what he really did was, he gave me the push to say, do what you want to do on your own terms. And so I did a management buyout of the division that I had created intrapreneurially at Telamon, and had the opportunity to grow it to what it is today, and really pivot and rebrand what our longtime family business TechServ did in support of all of the conglomerate of things that we're doing today. So I think that in that context, there is, of course, more to work on, but those are my foundational principles as I continue to see what's next.
Well, that was certainly what I was curious next. In 2018, you acquired the healthcare division of Telamon and brought that together with your family, your mother's business, TechServ. I've always been curious, what was that leap like? But it sounds a bit like a push, maybe.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes, absolutely. It was like, do it. And like, okay.
But just still a leap on your behalf.
Very true, very true. And I would say that was definitely not a cliff leap. That was more of a, we've given you this great runway, right? It's really time to spread your wings. It's now or never, right? And I really am very thankful, because organizations don't have to respond that way. They can just say, sorry, it's not a fit, or nope, that's not our strategy, or my favorite one, that's not where the board wants to go, right? And so to be able to be given not a very much time for the decision, but a very long runway to be prepared to take it on, I think was a transformational opportunity for me to go back to live the legacy of responsibility. Because at that point in time, my work didn't live up to my values. And there were things that I wanted to do more, but I was rightfully hamstrung, because that was not the strategy and direction of that organization. And to really being impactful, we really needed to go all the way. And so what all the way meant to us was, we had to look at what were the core assets of our healthcare division, what were the core assets of the higher education portfolio that TechServ had for 20 plus years, and say, how do we cross-pollinate two totally different industries, two totally different workforces, right? In higher ed, we had made a name for ourselves in Illinois, focused on delivering technology solutions to higher ed. So we created 47 computer labs in the Chicago public school systems. We built the Customs Border Patrol passport scanning stations at Terminal 5 in Chicago O'Hare. Right? These are things that I can proudly say that TechServ did, but I wasn't at the helm, and I didn't know until later. I'm like reading through old contracts, looking at old invoices, like, wow, this is amazing. And then on the healthcare side, it's being able to not only understand the individuality of the skill set that you're delivering to the patient, but also how does that skill set in an organizational process, can it be delivered with standard, with marketable services, with an understanding to the core community so they know that they can come to your location for care. And, you know, there's a tremendous amount of translation, right? So and we have this saying of, oh, that's all academia, or, oh, well, nobody really understands healthcare. I mean, there's a reason why we say that. And so oversimplified, our job is to ensure that we are translating it for our user in a way that they can impact their constituents that they serve in the most efficient and effective way.
Talk to me. I mean, you have a lot of different things you're doing in communities. Mm-hmm. Tell me about your community impact work and why that is important to you.
Yeah. So, you know, we can never judge another's trauma, right? So I'll get a little vulnerable with you for a moment. I said earlier that, you know, my heritage is Chinese. And so I have been measured against lofty expectations all my life. And then they have this burden and responsibility of who my grandparents are. But there are a lot of things in the Chinese culture that are very taboo. So mental health is taboo. Substance misuse is taboo. Divorce is taboo. So I learned at a very old age, I would say, when I was 24, at the heyday of me growing this organization and expanding this course of business and taking evening MBA classes to make sure I was doing my job right and doing it well, I get a message on LinkedIn. And I'm like, who is this person? So I'm very focused on networking, very focused on building my business at the time. And this person says, hey, I know your sister. And I'm thinking, my sister, so I'm 23, 24 at the time. I'm like, my sister, who's 11 years younger than me, is 12. Like, why is somebody on LinkedIn contacting me? Well, at 24, I find out that my mom is not my mom, is not my biological mother. And I find this out through an interaction on LinkedIn. Because my father had been divorced many, many years ago, and I was about 2 years old, and I have a sister that is 14 months younger than me. And I find this out in a business context. Wow. Right? And I'm thinking to myself, why didn't we have these conversations? Why wasn't this open? And so I had this just transformational, a very difficult next 2 years, where I would say that there was a lot of just, who am I? Mm-hmm. What is my identity? Probably not the healthiest behaviors during that time frame, but really looking at it and saying, when something happens and your worldview shifts, how do you deal with that? And then I had an opportunity to kind of reconcile that. But it took a time. Mm-hmm. And I had the opportunity to then myself become a stepmother. And for any person out there that is a step parent, that is a whole nother journey. Mm-hmm. And it is beautiful, and it is terrible, and it is hard, and it is easy all at the same time. Mm-hmm. Right? And so, like I said it in the beginning, for others that are hearing the story, that you might say, well, that doesn't seem traumatic at all. That is no big deal, right? You gained a mom. You have a whole nother sister. Oh, you gained a mom, a sister, a whole nother family. But it was traumatic to who I was as an individual as far as my identity, learning it in that way and learning it abruptly that way. And I think that when I look at what is our normative societal perspectives of family, what is our normative perspectives of identity and culture, etc., we don't give the opportunity to have all of these stories come to the light of day and celebrate all of these stories, right? Because we have this perception of what is whole, what is true, what is right, versus simply what is. And as I clasped my grandma and said, but you're here. I had to take a very long journey to reconcile the fact that, so I'm here. And it doesn't matter what my history is. It matters what my future is. And it matters what the impact that I will leave. And it does mean that I have this whole other group of people that I can learn to care for, exchange with, and interact with, right? And I think that that is, for me, why when I look at community, it is very visceral to me, because it's not a other. It's not a what needs help. It's a holistically, who are we when we are uniquely ourselves and our compositive experiences and just our kind of amalgamation of everything to be, here is how we make the place that we are the best that it can be. And when we look at that, we have poverty down the street from us. We have individuals that are suffering with mental health inside of their, otherwise what would seem picture of perfect lives. We have individuals that yet still today are dealing with racism, right? That are dealing with the burden of not being welcome or not being on the right? The right side, the wholesome side, the normative society side, because of just who they are. And that to me is still astounding. I've had my own personal journeys and experiences with that. But I think that if I hadn't had, to me, what was a trauma, I wouldn't be able to see this perspective in my lens. I wouldn't be as welcoming, and I wouldn't be as open to say, it's not your past that defines you. It's who you're becoming and why you want to become that person. And there are many, many other stories, but those are not my traumas. I was a caregiver, or I was a support partner, or I was just a person walking with that individual on that journey. But those are not my stories to share. And I think that in our experiences in life, when you go through something that is hard, you have to come out of it with, what have I learned? Who am I now? And how do I take that and make it the most positive, beautiful human experience that it can be? So I don't know. I'll stop just pontificating there.
No, I love
just, we'll
pontificate away.
Next question.
Well, and I think that's a very shared women's experience.
Yes.
As well, right? Taking what you have given or has happened to you and going with it. Talk to me about how that pursuit of community impact has influenced the work at TechServ.
So, I'm a big finance operations person, right? And so when I read stats like 47% of Indianapolis public school students didn't have access to Wi-Fi at home and they couldn't e-learn, immediately I'm like, so our normative society says, okay, everybody's getting grocery delivery, everybody's e-learning at home. Oh, what a struggle. And we have kids and, it's hectic within our households. And you say, but what's this story? And this story isn't even coming to light because this story doesn't have the access to be published, doesn't have the access to be shared. And then we have, very specific stories of, when I was younger in my formative years, living in the south side of Chicago in HUD housing, I thought it was an awesome childhood. You had kids all around, there's playgrounds, you're having a good time. I didn't think it was anything, to be looked down upon and whatnot. And then you look at how housing and housing affordability, and how the original regulations accounted for really creating neighborhoods, right? And now the other side of it, what are those maintenance plans? Are those buildings actually being kept up, right? Are we providing clean water, non-lead surfaces, etc., for families to be raised in? And you think to this community impact of what is the story that's not being shared? What is not the right, wholesome, normative, right? Well, what is that story? Because that story has just as much, quote unquote, right, permission, responsibility, really, to be shared. Because if you have that fact and you are in a position to do something to change that fact, then that is no longer a statistic, right? That is your work. So my work is these facts that people are like, oh, well, that's just a stat, or that's just, that's 2020 numbers, or that's 2018 numbers. No, those are people. Those are families. Those are children. And if you say that you are for community, but you can't read beyond the stat and you cannot face the facts, then you're not of the community and you're not doing the work with the community.
So, as your friend, I often joke, do you just plug in at night? Like, when do you sleep? When does she ever, stop? When do you just take a break? And so, you're a mom.
I am a mom. It's a terrible joy. It's a terrible joy.
That's just because he's in his twos, right?
Yes, yes.
How do you manage running this business, pursuing these incredibly important community impact projects, and being a mom, being a stepmom, being a wife? How do you?
When you list it like that, I feel like stress. I feel like my heart palpitations. It's okay. It's
deep breath. Because it's a shared experience. I mean, we're not all running TechServ, but I find that's also a very shared experience among women. And how do you do it?
I get this question a lot, and you have you've been a long time dear friend of mine, and you've seen me not like this. You've seen me where you've called me and go, Can I just take care of you? And I appreciate you for doing that.
Ditto.
And I just, I think this is when we talk about burdens and legacy and who we are. I think it's time for real talk, right? I think as women, as mothers, we need to better articulate what it is that this burden is, because it is a terrible joy of motherhood, because it is visceral, it is fear, it is pain, and it's beauty and it's joy. But at the end of the day, it is the past, present, and the future in a symbiotic balance, pinpoint needlehead every single minute of the day. Right? It's who your mother was, who her mother was, who your peers of mothers are, who you fear or get excited about what your child will become. And I have a son. He's white presenting and he's male. And there are all sorts of fears that I have just in that superficial view identity of him, right? And then there's all this heritage and legacy that I want him to be a part of as well. But I think for women, I am newly initiated into the clan of motherhood. And it is many, many, many other mothers that have been my support system, that have said, it is hard, but it's worth it. And it's real. So I don't know how to answer that question, except that my calendar is very well scheduled. And sometimes I just take it 30 minutes at a time. But because I was raised by serial entrepreneurs, and I was raised in a household where I don't want to give the sense that my parents didn't care about children. It's just that in the Chinese, I shouldn't say all of Chinese heritage, but there is a very real perspective that children should have a place, have a space, and they're not necessarily 100% priority number one. And then you compare that with American ideology of children, and it's a very different, right, spectrum. So I try to balance it in that there is mom time, there is CEO time, there is, well, I appreciate my husband because there's very little wife time. But I look at that and saying, right now with my son being 2, I've been a CEO longer than I've been a mom. So there's a lot of CEOing my motherhood. And as I'm trying to transition that, but there is literally scheduled times in my calendar of quality block time where Augie and I have a meeting and we go somewhere and we do this thing and there's objectives, right? Like there's a meeting agenda. Oh boy, I hope this is all very positive in his influencing when he grows up. But I'm not as natural except for whenever my son comes into my office, irrespective if I, like the other day, he kind of escaped. So he ran into my office while I was doing a presentation for 43 people. And I just very naturally went, and here is our guest speaker, Augie, and just introduced him to all 43 people. And I said, and if you will excuse me, the guest speaker has a momentary need, and I will be back in 30 seconds. Rushed him out, still had the camera going, the audio going. And I have an incredible support team to help me navigate throughout the day. And I think additional kind of community impact moment, come to the previous question that you said, is I don't know how any mother does it without a tribe. And, you know, I am incredibly privileged that I have a tribe of my in-laws who drive from Terre Haute every weekend so that I can write grants or catch up on, you know, the work that goes into running the company. That's 4 hours round trip every weekend, no questions asked, no judgment. And then a team, a very intricate team of well-scheduled, very well spaced out babysitters that really allow me to have my core 40 of uninterrupted time every week. And otherwise, it is literally constant praying, a lot of coffee, and I've just been one of those people that can operate on very little sleep, and so that is already like hours put forth or towards. I don't know how to unplug, and that's been one of the greatest challenges for me growing older and having the opportunity to. For my own self-care and mental health, I've not been able to just stop. And so I'm learning how to do that.
You're working on it.
Yeah.
You're working on it. I like how you borrow from the corporate world in parenting.
Oh, yeah.
Having received an Outlook invite for a play date. It's a good protection of time on both sides. I think that is clever, actually. And, you know, speaking of legacy, your grandmother Judy started TechServ 30 years ago.
Yes.
You took over for your mother.
Yes.
What is it like to carry on that legacy in this business?
You know, it's funny because I often call my grandmother and mother. So not a week goes by that I don't speak with both of them, at least several times a week. And it's interesting how we fall into grandma, granddaughter role and mother-daughter role. And then our very next conversation will switch to CEO role and advisory role. And it's very interesting because I think to be a good business owner, you have to practice compartmentalized thinking. And you cannot be emotional even with your closest relationships. And that's hard, right? But you have to be very clear on what hat you're wearing in what context of what conversation. And it helps that I'm very compartmentalized and very type A already to begin with, because I'll start a conversation with, okay, with my TechServ hat on, with the existing project, what do you think? And kind of give the details. And then I'll come back and go, okay, now with my Sunny hat on, this person, blah, 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 how should I deal with that, right? And it's just very interesting how the people that love you and care for you and allow you to be unapologetically you know how you communicate and almost have ways of managing you, right? And so it's been phenomenal my grandmother is 90 this year, sharp as anything else, goes out and doesn't walk 10,000 steps a day, right? I need a tracker to be like, get up, like move, right? She doesn't walk 10,000 steps a day. She goes out to exercise, completing 10,000 steps in one swoop during her exercise, and does a good 21,000 steps a day, every day at 90. And she said, the saddest thing about this entire pandemic, and I know we should not make light of this, but I just wanted to kind of give an example of the kind of person that she is and her wonderful, vivacious personality and love for life. She goes, this pandemic has really been a thorn in my side. I can't get on a cruise ship and do the all-you-can-eat buffets all day long. And I'm like, I love you. I love you, you wonderful woman, you. So it's a joy talking with her. It is. I get upset and I leave her funny voicemails like, I'm sorry, I am scheduled for my 10 o'clock call right now, and you are not available. Who are you talking to? Are they on the clock? Are they being contracted for this time? And it's just funny things like that. And it's funny. She reads contracts for me. So we have a lot of international business, and I'm always like, ooh, they sent it in Chinese this time. Can you, and she was always funny. She's like, how much are your attorneys charging now? I'm like, well, I'm going to give you a, interpretation rate and then the legal rate. But it's very funny. And she loves being, valued, and she loves participating in it, right? And she's had so many entrepreneurial efforts in her life. She's had an ice cream shop and a coffee shop and an English language teaching school when she was here. When she came to the States, when we were younger, we would when we were in school, my grandparents would come here, and then when we were on break for summers, etc., we would all go back to Taipei. And she had a mahjong teaching school in Chicago, Illinois for some time. And I just thought, this woman, entrepreneurial, right? It's just phenomenal. So I didn't know she was a founder until I looked at the stock certification. I don't know if people know this. I didn't know this, but like in our day and age of technology, it's a book. It's a hard book. And there's a numbered certificates. And they're brightest day, 1992. The formation of this actual record book and the number of certificates that we've given out, brought back in, and shares and so forth. And I was just like, had no idea. So, I said it was a wonderful story. And my good friend and PR publicist, Kara Kavinsky, said, yes, that is a great story. And so you can read all about it on the Indiana Chamber's latest article about the 3 generation of Blue women.
I love it. Okay. Well, Sunny, thank you so much for sharing all the parts of yourself.
My pleasure.
It is a pleasure to learn so much about you and where you come from.
Thank you, my friend, for being my interviewer. It was much easier to have this conversation. Thank you so much. And thank you all for your time today. Really appreciate you participating.